What's the difference between a liberal and a leftist? This question stumps most people because they think liberal and left are essentially the same. But they're not. In fact, liberalism and leftism have almost nothing in common. But the left has appropriated the word liberal so effectively, almost everyone, liberals, leftists, and conservatives, thinks they are synonymous. But they're not.
In the US, anyway, this misconception doesn't really exist outside of North America, unless you're talking people in a non-North American country who get all of their news about politics from the US, which I don't know what you're doing there, but look, we're not even 30 seconds in, and Dennis Prager has gone from simply stating the concept that liberals and leftists are not synonyms, which I do agree with, by the way, to the idea that this is like a purposeful appropriation by the left in order to make liberals that are not evil leftists more accepting of leftist ideas because of some tribalistic dividing solidarity thing. I mean, look, don't you think that this misconception could be because of the far-right reactionary politics of the Cold War era that are afraid of anything marginally progressive? Could that be the case? No, I don't know. I'm just putting...
Let me offer you 6 examples. 1. Race.
Oh, God.
This is probably the most obvious difference between liberal and left. The liberal position on race has always been A, the color of a person's skin is insignificant, and B, those who believe race is significant are racists.
This is an extremely simplistic view of racism that I actually did hold myself until 2018. I mean, it's basically the Morgan Freeman position, right? Just don't talk about it. But look, I am a racial abolitionist. I want a world where race doesn't exist, where it doesn't matter and it doesn't affect anything. But that is not the world we have now. And we are never, ever, ever going to get to that by just crossing our arms and saying, well, I'm colorblind. My hands are off at this one, pal. I mean, just stop talking about it and go away, you know? Racism begets racism. That's not how it works, okay? I want that to be the case so bad, but it's not. It's a fantasy, okay? We have a responsibility to point out subtle racism, and that does not mean that the individuals are inherently bad people for holding these views, or a lot of times that it's even a personal character failing of them to have these things. You know, when leftists critique these things, they're not necessarily criticizing the people as individuals. They are criticizing a larger collective. I am so sick of this misunderstanding. Can we please just mentally graduate middle school already? Oh my God!
Meanwhile, the left believes the very opposite. To the left, it's the liberal attitude toward race. It's unimportant. That is racist.
No, that's not true at all. This is such a simplistic and misleading way of framing it. Obviously, you're not racist for thinking race is unimportant. I think that race is unimportant. But it's just something that reinforces racism by being extremely unproductive. Like I've laid out before, I don't need to repeat myself.
That's why the University of California officially lists the statement, "There is only one race, the human race," as racist.
And fuck the University of California for reinforcing the same stupid, misleading horseshit as you. Yeah, I agree. That's pretty cringe.
And liberals have always been passionately committed to racial integration.
Just for fun, do you want a counterexample? Do you want to hear it? General piece of shit Woodrow Wilson coined the godfather of liberalism by the Heritage Foundation was the one who enacted Jim Crow!
While the left is increasingly committed to racial segregation, such as all black dormitories and separate black graduations at universities.
And while I do think that the right wing's hyper-focus on this is a little bit overblown, I generally don't agree with this stuff. I think that it's just a really reactionary and divisive way of solving a problem. Yeah, that's cringe.
2. Capitalism. Liberals have always been pro-capitalism because liberals are committed to free enterprise and because they know capitalism is the only way to lift great numbers of people out of poverty.
No, capitalism obviously isn't the only way to lift people out of poverty. This is something that's been said on PragerU's channel in like 75 different videos. And you know what the deep reasoning of it is? Do you want to hear it? Venezuela. Innovation. 100 billion dead in the Soviet Union. Fidel Castro. I'm moving on. This is just stupid.
It is true that liberals want government to play a bigger role in the economy than conservatives do.
Yes, that's true in the case of the economy, because American conservatives have been cucks for huge corporations basically as long as there have been American conservatives. But look, in this image, Dennis Prager did not check off bigger government involvement in the economy. He checked off bigger government in general. PragerU does this kind of shit all the time, where they just tell you a really specialized subset of a point, and then they just subtly kind of just sneak in a much more broader point. Hopefully your subconscious accepts it and you become more right-wing when you wake up tomorrow. But no, outside of the economy, conservatives are actually pretty big government. I mean, just look at the way the military works, for example. If a bunch of rich, powerful pricks decide that it's time to trade blood for oil again, you have a penis, out to war with you, go die for a country, useless piece of shit. Or just look at the police, which is an institution that the right generally supports way more than the left, who are allowed to be the judge, jury, and executioner. There are all kinds of examples like this, but you should hopefully get the point.
But liberals never opposed capitalism, and they were never for socialism.
Yes, that is true, Dennis, since liberalism basically just means capitalism in every country outside of North America.
Opposition to capitalism and advocacy of socialism are left-wing values.
That is generally true, yes, but you are kind of ignoring the existence of market socialism when you say this. But if you just mean capitalism as something that is like vehemently not socialist and not just the existence of markets, then yeah, that's true.
3. Nationalism. Liberals believe in the nation-state, whether that nation is the United States, Brazil, or France. But because the left divides the world by class rather than by national identity,
that's obviously the reasonable thing to do. I mean, there is some pretty brain-dead class reductionism going on the left, and you obviously can't boil everything down to the proletariat versus the evil capitalist. That's too simplistic. But look, I, as an American who grew up lower middle class, have way more in common with a worker from the third world than I do with some out-of-touch rich prick like Bill Gates, who can't even guess the price of a box of cereal to save his life.
the left has always opposed nationalism.
And they're pretty in the right for doing that, because nationalism is an asinine, sentimental urge that elites spoon-feed to an uninformed population in order to control them. I mean, when it comes to nationalism in the US these days, there are typically two kinds of groups, mostly. One is a generally pretty uninformed citizen who have just never really heard any counterexamples to nationalism being pretty wholesome and epic. We won't get into that right now. And then the second group are people that are down on their luck and they don't have a lot going on in their life. They don't have many friends. They don't have a job. They aren't getting anywhere. They feel like shit. But then, if they can be part of a bigger national identity, a history, or if we're getting a little crazy here, a larger ethnic identity, then they feel big. They feel important. The void is filled. I mean, to end on my feelings on this, I'd like to read a quote from Arthur Schopenhauer about nationalism. He says, and I quote, "Every miserable fool who has nothing at all which he can be proud adopts as a last resource pride in the nation to which he belongs. He is ready and happy to defend all its faults and follies tooth and nail, thus reimbursing himself for his own inferiority.
So, while liberals have always wanted to protect American sovereignty and borders, the left is for open borders.
Ah, yes, the classic open borders fearmonger and strawman. An absolute classic. Most progressives do not want open borders. I mean, I personally do, because I'm very anti-authoritarian. I think that people's lives are very enhanced by the open movement that it would provide. I think that it's pretty fucked, the idea that you can just be born into this earth and not go into certain parts of it because of some complex political shit. But it's obviously not something that we could do overnight. If we just did it overnight, there would be economic turmoil. It would be horrible. It would be even worse than this current disease epidemic. It's obviously something that we need to ease into, and any leftist who thinks we should do open borders overnight is not a serious person, and they need to be just discarded from the conversation immediately.
When the writers of Superman were liberals,
I don't care. Next.
the left has contempt for nationalism, seeing it as the road to fascism.
It absolutely is, because nationalism is an absolutely integral and irreplaceable element of fascism. If you know anything about the history of fascism, and just look up the definition of fascism on Wikipedia, that's not to say that all nationalists are fascists, but it is to say that all fascists are nationalists. And it's to say that nationalists are much more open to going down a dark fascism path, but by dishonest actors that want to convert them to there by any means necessary.
Better that we should all be citizens of the world in a world without borders.
Sounds fucking awesome. Where do I sign up? Where is this world without borders? Let me in it now.
Let me in.